This is Twit.
Well, a new piece at SlateBite.com by investigative journalist Alan Holmes said that the future of wireless communication may be decided by lobbyists, think tanks, and academics who are paid for their opinions. Joining us is Alan Holmes, who's a writer-analyst for the Center for Public Integrity. Did I get your title right there, Alan?
That's correct. Yes, that's fine.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us today. Now, who are the biggest lobbyists influencing U.S. policy on wireless?
Well, it's right now, AT&T and Verizon have always been right up there among the biggest. They're perennially in the top 10 or 20 lobbyists. They hire some of the most powerful law firms on K Street here in Washington to go to the FCC or to visit members of Congress. So it's AT&T and Verizon. And then second, far behind, actually, is T-Mobile and Sprint. And this is just in the telecommunications area that we're talking about. Of course, there's lobbyists in the healthcare, pharmaceuticals, but AT&T and Verizon are right up there with the biggest ones.
Now, this is really the core issue, isn't it? It's the big companies versus the little ones, and the ability for the largest companies like AT&T. I believe AT&T. I read somewhere recently that over the last 10 years, they're not only the biggest lobbyist company in the industry, they are the single biggest contributor to campaigns and to government of any company or any organization. Is that correct, or did I misread that?
Yeah, they're right up there. They give millions and millions to campaigns. It's just, I think you can count probably the people on it's easier to count the people that haven't gotten money from AT&T rather than the ones that have. They spread their largesse far and wide, both Republicans and Democrats. They're also very, very active in the state legislatures where they create really strong relationships. They employ people all in every single state. So they're kind of like the defense industrial complex. And so they can go to the state legislatures and say, look, we employ this number of people in your district or in your state. And they get a very welcome ear, both in state and the federal. But yeah, you're right. They're among the top in contributing to campaigns through their PACs.
Now, it's easy to understand a wide variety of interests that these companies are lobbying for. They want things to go their way. They want the FCC to get off their backs on various issues. But there's a big spectrum auction coming up next year, and that's a key thing that everybody's lobbying for, isn't it? Can you tell us about this spectrum auction and what's at stake?
Sure. This is right now dominating the FCC. There's a law professor out of the University of Pennsylvania Christopher Yu, who follows communications law. Just as 3 days ago, he was on a panel and he called it the giant sucking sound coming out of the FCC is the spectrum incentive auction. And basically what it is that it's they're going to ask television broadcasters in the 600 megahertz band, which is very valuable frequency. It goes very long distance. It goes through buildings very easily. The kind of spectrum you need when you go down into the basement of a building and you're on a call or in an elevator and it doesn't drop. That's really good spectrum to have. And it's going to be auctioned off probably next year, probably around the summer. They're coming out with the rules for that auction in May. And what they want to do is take this, they pay the television broadcasters to give up the spectrum. And then they're going to put it on auction. And most likely the wireless companies, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, Sprint, are going to be the big bidders on this spectrum, as well as the smaller carriers, U.S. Cellular, C Spire, and others. That want this spectrum, and it's the last of its kind. They already auctioned off the 700 megahertz band back in 2008. Remember when we went to digital TV? So there's not going to be much more of this left, and it's what you really need to build a nationwide network. AT&T and Verizon have a lot of this spectrum that's basically is called sub 1 gigahertz spectrum. It's in the 700 and 800 megahertz band, but T-Mobile and Sprint don't have very much of it. So if they're going to compete with AT&T and Verizon, they need this. So the fight is over. AT&T and Verizon want to buy this up. T-Mobile and Sprint want AT&T and Verizon to have limits put on them by the FCC so that they can get more and so they can compete. And so that's what the fight's all about.
And it's fascinating because the airways belong to the public, belong to the people, and yet here it is, all this money is being spent to influence the government to sell it to these companies in various ways. Now, when everybody knows lobbying exists and these big companies have lobbyists, everybody, I think, imagines that a lobbying organization sets up an office on K Street, hires some lobbyists, they take congressmen to lunch, do things like that, try to influence them by convincing them. But the extent of lobbying is much vaster than that, isn't it? You wrote about the giving of cash to think tanks and associations, the paying of academics for various things. Now, these academics will go on network TV news and give opinions as academics or as members of think tanks, but in fact they're paid shills essentially for these companies. Can you give us some sense of the range of lobbying efforts that take place by the AT&Ts of the world?
Right. You said it exactly right. What's happened is, traditionally lobbyists, they would, file with Congress saying that they're lobbying, and you track the spending. It's very open. It's very easy to track. But really what's happening is that it's gone kind of underground now. And it's probably, in some estimates, the experts who follow this, it's about 3 times the amount that we can actually track. And it's hiring of public relations firms. It's paying association dues. It's paying think tanks that don't necessarily say that they're being funded by these companies. And then what they do is they go out and create very academic-looking research papers. They file them with the FCC. Congress picks them up and mentions them on the House floor, or the Senate floor, or in letters to the FCC. So it's this kind of perpetual loop that has been created, and you don't know who's behind what. And it basically is creating an atmosphere where everybody has to jump in and do this. Everybody has to get their academic or their think tank to do the type of work that they need to support their position. But it's also on what typically might look like a really innocuous nonprofit. You have like the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, filing at the FCC supporting that there should be no spectrum limits, but then you find out that they get money from AT&T. So it's much darker, it's much harder to follow, and it just creates this whirlwind here in Washington about who's supporting what and what is objective research and what's not.
But is it really dark? I mean, these companies, the AT&Ts of the world and Verizons and so on, they are really expert in the delivering of services to customers, and they're trying to serve their customers. That's ultimately what they're trying to do because that's their business. Isn't it okay that they are the most influential voice in Washington? I mean, after all, they're both experts and they're also trying to serve customers.
That would be true, yes, if you create an atmosphere of competition. Right now, they have about 2/3 of all the wireless subscribers together. T-Mobile and Sprint have about 30% of the remaining. If you create a situation where they can continue to get most of the subscribers, and right now their networks are better than T-Mobile and Sprint, as most analysts say. But what the Justice Department has filed last year and why they shut down the purchase of AT&T's purchase of T-Mobile back in 2011 was because they're trying to keep a market that's at least close to competition. There's with 4 carriers. At one point, the Justice Department said years and years ago that it should be 6, 7, or 8. We're really down to 4. And what happens is the argument is that when you don't have competition, you get complacent, innovation goes away, prices go up, and that's what basically the argument of the Obama administration is, that we got to keep competition. And most economists, I think, would agree, although there's there are some economists who are saying that otherwise. But right now, there is competition. You can see what T-Mobile's been doing with their,
Sure. Right.
their plans to make it cheaper for customers. If T-Mobile doesn't get this spectrum, and they see it as a kind of basically a make it or break it auction for them.
Yep.
If they don't get it, they go away, and so does that competition.
Very interesting. Well, I want to thank you, Alan, for joining us today. It's been very enlightening, and I think I'd like to urge everyone to go read your piece on slate.com. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
You can find Alan's work on publicintegrity.org, and you can find him on Twitter at ATHolmes.